everyone, my name is Sam and thanks for checking out my video. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and give it a thumbs up. So this week I managed to read a total of 5 books, and I have 4 physical copies and one of them was a pure audiobook that I wasn't able to follow along with. I'm really happy with that because I didn't have much chance to read last weekend, so even with that I was still able to hit my pretty average number of 5 for a week. So the first book that I read this week was When the Moon Was Ours by Anne-Marie McLemore. I'm actually surprised. I own 3 books by this author, and this is the first time I've actually read her stuff, so I'm planning on reading Wild Beauty in December, so hopefully I'll be almost caught up by that point. This is a magical realism book. I'm pretty hesitant when it comes to magical realism. I find contemporaries kind of boring for the most part for my tastes, so I was pretty hesitant. You know, it's a pretty small book, and I also managed to get the audiobook on a daily deal for like $3 off of Audible, so I figured, might as well, give it a go. What's the worst that could happen? This book is, it's beautifully written. That's really all I can say about it. It's got some really important content and just around transgender and being someone like that. I actually don't think I've ever read a book with a transgender character in it, which I hope that those characters become more easy to find in content. And I think as our society moves forward, I look forward to seeing that. We are slowly getting some more diversity in our books in terms of, race, orientation, and all that kind of stuff. So I really do look forward to that happening. I don't even know how to summarize this book. It's like a very weird, one girl has roses growing out of her arms and she was created because of a water tower collapsing, and there's her mother and it's just a very weird book that even the summary itself doesn't really totally explain what happens in the book. And I think it's one of those books that you should just go into. It's one of those books that you're not ever really gonna oh, I know what's going on. It's a weird book, but in a very good way. And the writing, Anne-Marie McLemore is an amazing, amazing writer. I was incredibly impressed by this. I don't think, just because the story is it is what it is. It's not a fast-paced adventure or questing or anything like that. It's got a pretty steady pace, and I don't know if the writing had been, unless the writing had been as good as it was in here, I don't know that I would have finished it. Not that it was bad. I probably would have gotten bored and kind of dozed off, but she just has a way with words of making everything so it just sounds almost like a nursery rhyme or a lullaby. It's just so enchanting and beautifully written, and I'm so excited about Wild Beauty now. For that and many other reasons, I ended up giving this a book a 5 out of 5. Like I said, I don't think it's a book that I really have any right to make any sort of criticisms about it. It was just more of a learning book for me in terms of one of the characters specifically, because like I said, it's not something that I've never dealt with it myself. It's never something that I've read before in a book. So I was incredibly impressed by this book overall. The second book that I read this week was Codename Verity by Elizabeth Wein. I bought this book and its sequel, Rose Under Fire, I believe it is, in either last December or this past May. So it's been either 6 or almost 12 months, and I am incredibly angry at myself for waiting as long to read this as I did. Another one, the writing is absolutely amazing. This is I don't know that I've ever read 2 books back to back that have such good quality of writing. The writing is very different between Wein and Anne-Marie McLemore, but I don't even know how to explain it. It flows. She knew what her point was, and she created 2 different characters, and they both had very distinct voices despite her being able to keep that flow and that tone in her own writing. I'm just amazed by that. This book broke my heart. It's got alternating points of view and kind of timelines between, I believe they're, one of them is Scottish, I can't remember what the other one was, becoming pilots and getting involved in they get dropped behind enemy lines in Germany during World War II. And it's absolutely heartbreaking and gut-wrenching, and you don't get that happy ending. And that is so rare in YA books, which is why I have a hard time picking up YA historical fictions and loving them. But this book went there, and I so appreciate it when an author is able to do that, especially tackling a time period like World War II and getting caught behind enemy lines. You don't get a happy wrap-up in many of the majority of those situations. So I was just blown away by this book. I can't read the sequel or the prequel quite yet. This book just broke me. And, if you watch my vlog, you get to see that. And I'm absolutely going to be picking up the other books in 2018. It's just one of those books that, again, I don't think you can really criticize it. You just need to read it to understand things and see points of view, and it was able to give that amazing realistic wrap-up and good strong female characters and amazing writing. I don't think I've ever read a book this good, especially historical fiction. It just absolutely blew me away, and I'm so happy I own a copy of this, and it very much deserved Michael Prince Award. I just cannot say enough good things about this book, and you should absolutely read it. There's not tons of dialogue, and it didn't take away from it at all. The characters were amazingly written and observant, and the details and everything. Yeah, so I gave this book a 5 out of 5, and I cannot say enough good things about this, and I'm absolutely, actually the day after I finished this, I went and picked up, I think it's called Black Dove, White Cameron or something like that, by the same author. I know I've seen the reviews that it's not as good, but I'm just absolutely in love with this author's writing, and I think she might be moving up as an instant buy author for me. So, yeah, highly recommend this one. The third book that I read this week is Fire Falling by Elise Kova. This book broke me. Again, if you look at my vlog, I just sat silently for about 5 minutes after reading the final line, and then I had like a cry nightmare. I mean, I can't really give too much of a summary without giving away. This is the second book in the Air Awakens series by Elise Kova. So the first book of Air Awakens, without giving too many spoilers or anything like that, is set in this magical world where the main character, Vala, is a librarian, and she's kind of an orphan, and all of a sudden in the first book there is this world has elementals, and the kingdom that she lives in is at war with another one and kind of trying to expand. The two royal sons and the royal emperor they're all very distinct characters, but they're all very much feared by the locals because they do have this kind of emotional political wall up around them for pretty understandable reasons. She suddenly develops powers and of an element that has not been in this geographic area in a long time, and it spells disaster for her, but it spells potentially a change and a shift in the war for this kingdom. And those, despite being on the same side, they definitely don't have everyone's best interest at heart, and they're definitely not working together. So this book picks up after the main girl, Vala, is sent to war, and there's romance and lots of magic development and tons of characters and sexual tension up the wazoo. I was trying to read it in like sections, but Elise Kova has this ability to like, it very much reminds me of Sarah J. Maas, that ability to like, I just know that there's going to be a relationship switch by the end of this series, and that's why I'm so hesitant to get like attached or anything like that. It's just such a good YA fantasy, and I really do like this. Again, a similarity to Max. The main character, especially her being a girl, she is not some pure innocent woman. She has not been untouched, and there is not this kind of down looking at her for this. It's just it kind of just shows the differences of societies, because she's from one part of the world, but has since been moved to that kingdom, which has very different standards, and it's very interesting to see the differences, and you interact with characters in this book from all over the world, so you get to see these different classifications and different understandings of things, and it's really cool to see that sort of analysis. So I would very much highly recommend this series. I'm reading Earthsed right now, and I just know I'm going to be heartbroken by the end of it. By the way, I gave Fire Falling a 5 out of 5. I mean, it literally gave me like cry nightmares because of how it ended. So the fourth book that I read this week was Scarlet by A.C. Gaughan. This was probably my least enjoyed read of the week. I mean, I've definitely read worse books, and I didn't DNF it, but I had problems with this book. It's essentially supposed to be kind of a loose retelling of Robin Hood, but obviously, as you can tell from the cover, there's a woman involved, and and she's hiding who she is and her lineage. She is also lying to the group of people that she is hanging around with with Robin Hood area about that she is a woman. She is pretending to be a man. Some people know and some people don't know, and that kind of develops over the course of the book. I think it was a very rough start, a very bumpy start. It did get better towards the end, and I don't know that I would continue reading the trilogy, except I already own the rest of the 2 books, so I think I will eventually get to them. They're not incredibly long, and I think they could just be like kind of like fun, fluffy reads, really, for the most part. The one thing that it really stuck out to me and extremely bugged me how it was handled in this book was the main character has this kind of potential romance going on with the Robin Hood character, as you would expect. And they have this kind of touch and go. They're not really in a relationship. They don't seem to be able to like fully kind of like say like, this is what I want, you want me, this. So they just kind of dance around that. Again, this happens a lot in YA. And then there's kind of a potential option outside of the main male lead. And he makes... And in this, like, fit of, I don't even think it was really, like, it wasn't in, like, a big screaming match or anything, so it can't even really be justified then. The main character, Robin Hood, calls her a whore. And then at the end, when they, like, all of a sudden, like, she just seems to forget that, and then vaguely kind of half mentions it, and he says, and I quote, "Oh, I just called you a whore to hurt you because hurting you hurts me." No, that is not an acceptable answer. That is not an acceptable way to deal with what you brought up. As an author, if you bring that up with that whore shaming because she wasn't totally pure for the one dude who apparently just couldn't communicate with her, that is immensely problematic, and I hate when YA books have that. That is not a good representation of a healthy relationship or a way to deal with emotions or a way to react when you yourself can't communicate. And that really, really peeved me off. For that reason, I'm not going to pick up the sequels right away. I just kind of want to sit on it and mull it over and evaluate it. And pretty similarly, I decided not to pre-order Reign the Earth, which is this author's new series. I'm going to wait to hear the reviews, because if that is something that continues over into that other series, I do not want to be reading more of that content. It's just outdated and unnecessary and incredibly problematic if you as an author are going to bring that up and then not deal with it. I mean, the way that it seemed very like, oh, I forgot to kind of deal with that thing. Either don't bring it up whatsoever or deal with it properly. For that reason, I gave Scarlet a 2.5. 3 stars. It definitely was like a solid 2 at the best, and then the end got a little bit better, but the ending didn't really, it didn't do what it needed to do by any means, and it wasn't a good way to end it to promote people like me picking up the sequel. The last book that I read this week was an audiobook called The Alice Network by Kate Quinn. I have been on hold for this book through my library since like 2 weeks, I think, before it came out, when it was available to like pre-waitlist it. So the gist of this book, it is a more general adult fiction. This main character woman is, I think she's like almost like 22 or something like that, and it's right after the Second World War. I believe it's 1947. She got pregnant while away at college, and she's not sure who the dad is, so her parents are sending her to Switzerland to get an appointment to deal with the problem. And along that way, you learn that her cousin, who she was very, very close with, who lived in France during the Second World War, has gone missing, and they don't know what exactly happened to her. And because of, I think, kind of a mixture of her emotional state at the time of being forced by her parents to deal with the problem the way that they were, as well as just like their general like relationship, she kind of sneaks away from her mom while in England, I believe it is, and just starts going on a search quest and runs into this very interesting female character and her kind of like right-hand servant man. They go on this quest, and you alternate between the points of view of the main character and then the past of her cousin Rose. And things go to hell in a handbasket very quickly for her, you find out. I enjoyed, actually. This book was a very odd book. I find books that alternate timelines, there's normally one, at page, for the first 100 pages, the more present timeline will be more interesting, whereas like the historical timeline will be a bit slower. And then they kind of switch back and forth. And sometimes that kind of annoys me, because I'm like, yeah, I don't care about this POV. I'd rather listen to what she has to say. But this book, I feel like it actually is what withheld me from enjoying it more. I ended up giving this book a 3 stars. It's by no means a bad book, and I thought it was really cool. It brought up some interesting comments on like women's rights, especially just in general at that time period, as like with access to abortion and public shaming and just women being able to be independent. And I mean, pretty sadly, a lot of these things are still going on today, which, I mean, it doesn't surprise me. It's just disappointing. I think my biggest problem was that each point of view was equally as good, and the pace stayed the same. There wasn't really any like big hype up, even when there was like, oh, them potentially like getting captured or tortured and all that kind of stuff, and like when people are shooting each other and everything. It just felt like the same pace as when they were talking about like introducing the characters. And I think it's more of a personal reading preference, but I just like, by like 60% of the way through the book, I was kind of like, can we be done now? Like, can we wrap this up? Like, nothing, I know that there's nothing else that's really going to happen. Like, I kind of saw the ending kind of reveal coming. I kind of enjoyed / didn't like the ending of it as well. I thought that the main character was going to end up, being solo and a single mom, and that was kind of where I got the impression that it was going to go. And then it seemed like the author kind of just like slapped an unnecessary romance, to be totally honest. I didn't see why it needed to happen. It could have just been a friendship and been as equally successful. I just didn't get why that happened that way. So those are the 5 books that I read this week. What did you read this week? Make sure to let me know if you've read any of these books in the comments section down below. Also, make sure to check out the description box where I've linked all of my social media and the Goodreads links to these books. If you follow me, I will follow you back.